In August 1990, Saddam Hussein sent his army into Kuwait and took it in 4 days. The world watched and waited. Then 35 countries assembled the largest military coalition since World War II. On January 17, 1991, the air campaign began. 100 hours of ground combat, later it was over. Iraq's army, the fourth largest in the world, was destroyed. This is every weapon that did it. We start with the coalition tanks. M1A1 Abrams, America's most advanced tank in 1991. 120mm gun, composite armor, and thermal sights that could see Iraqi tanks in complete darkness. At the Battle of 73 Easting, Abrams crews destroyed 80 Iraqi vehicles in 23 minutes. Iraq never had a chance. Challenger 1. Britain's contribution to the ground war. 120mm rifled gun and Chobham armor so thick that not a single Challenger was destroyed by enemy fire in the entire war. British crews drove these through Iraqi defenses like they were not there. AMX-30. F. Rance sent its AMX-30 tanks with the coalition's left flank. 105mm gun and fast enough to cover ground quickly. French armored units drove further and faster than anyone expected in the first hours of the ground assault, cutting off Iraqi retreat routes before dawn. M60 Patton. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and several other coalition partners fielded M608s alongside American forces. Older than the Abrams, but still capable against most Iraqi armor. Coalition M60 crews rarely got close enough to Iraqi tanks to find out the hard way whether the upgrade packages worked. Now, Iraqi tanks. T-72. Iraq's best tank, and it was not good enough. Soviet-designed 125mm gun and fielded in large numbers. But Iraqi T-72s had outdated fire control systems that could not match American thermal sights. American crews were killing T-72s from ranges the Iraqi gunners could not even see. Hundreds burned without firing a single return shot. T-62. Older Soviet tank Iraq fielded in large numbers. 115mm gun and armor that American 120mm rounds went through like paper. At the Battle of Medina Ridge, American Abrams crews destroyed over 300 Iraqi vehicles, including T-62s, in a few hours. The largest tank battle in American military history, and Iraq lost every tank in it. T-55. The oldest tank Iraq sent to war in 1991. Designed in the 1950s, still armed with a 100mm gun and completely outclassed by everything the coalition had. T-55 crews who survived the air campaign came out of their tanks and surrendered before the ground assault even reached them. That takes us to coalition infantry vehicles. M2 Bradley. America's infantry fighting vehicle, and it killed more Iraqi tanks in 1991 than the Abrams did. 25mm chain gun and TOW missiles that punched through T-72 armor from 2 kilometers. Bradley crews were shocked to discover their infantry vehicle was deadlier than the main battle tank in the desert. M113. Older American armored personnel carrier still in coalition service in 1991. Carried infantry to the fight and kept them alive getting there. Not a frontline combat vehicle, but essential for moving troops across hundreds of kilometers of desert in the ground assault. VAB, French-wheeled armored personnel carrier that carried Foreign Legion infantry during the left hook that cut off Kuwait. Fast on roads and desert tracks, reliable in sand, and present in numbers that let France move its division quickly enough to surprise Iraqi commanders who thought the flanks were safe. Now, Iraqi infantry vehicles. BMP-1. Soviet-designed infantry fighting vehicle Iraq fielded in large numbers. 73mm gun and anti-tank missiles that were completely outranged by coalition weapons. American Bradley crews destroyed BMP-1s at ranges the Iraqi gunners could not reach. Most BMP crews abandoned their vehicles before the coalition got close enough to engage. B TR-60, 8-wheeled Soviet armored personnel carrier that Iraqi infantry rode into the ground war. Lightly armored and completely vulnerable to American 25mm chain guns, hundreds were destroyed in the first hours of the ground assault. The crews that survived mostly walked into coalition lines to surrender. Moving on to coalition artillery. M1A1 Paladin, American self-propelled 155mm howitzer that fired more shells in 100 hours than some armies fire in years. Shoot and scoot tactics meant Iraqi counter-battery radar found empty ground where the Paladins had been. Iraqi artillery never silenced a single American battery. M270M LRS, multiple launch rocket system that Iraqi soldiers nicknamed the Steel Rain. 12 rockets in under a minute, each one releasing hundreds of submunitions over a target area. Iraqi units caught in the open by MLRS fire was simply erased. Nothing in the Iraqi arsenal could fire back fast enough to matter. AS-90, British self-propelled 155mm howitzer that supported British armored units through the Iraqi defensive lines. Accurate, fast-firing, and mobile enough to keep up with Challenger tanks moving at combat speed across the desert. Now, Iraqi artillery. 2 S-1 Gvozdika, Soviet self-propelled 122mm howitzer Iraq used to support its defensive lines. Outranged by coalition artillery and completely blind, once American electronic warfare destroyed Iraqi radar and communication systems. Iraqi gun crews fired mostly at map coordinates, hoping to hit something they could not see. GHN-45, Austrian-designed 155mm howitzer that was actually one of Iraq's better artillery pieces, longer range than most Soviet guns, and accurate enough to cause problems for coalition logistics. But without air cover and with coalition aircraft hunting every Iraqi vehicle that moved, GHN-45 crews could not stay in one place long enough to fire effectively. D-30, Soviet 122mm towed howitzer Iraq fielded in large numbers. Accurate and reliable in normal conditions, but completely exposed once coalition air superiority was established. American A-10s and British Tornadoes hunted Iraqi artillery pieces specifically, and D-30 batteries that fired gave away their position and died for it. Next up, coalition jets. F-15 Eagle, America's air superiority fighter, and it owned the sky over Iraq from the first night. 39 aerial kills in the Gulf War, 0 losses in air-to-air combat. Iraqi pilots who took off to fight F-15s rarely landed again. Most Iraqi aircraft fled to Iran rather than face them. F-16 Fighting Falcon, America's most numerous jet in the Gulf War. Ground attack missions against Iraqi airfields, supply depots, bridges, and troop concentrations. F-16 pilots flew more sorties than any other coalition aircraft. Fast, versatile, and present in numbers Iraq could not cope with. F-117 Nighthawk, the world's first operational stealth aircraft, and Baghdad never saw it coming. Flying into the most heavily defended airspace in the world on the first night of the war, F-117S put laser-guided bombs through the windows of Iraqi command buildings, while Iraqi air defense radar showed empty sky. 1,271 missions, 0 losses. A 10 Thunderbolt. Ugly, slow, and absolutely devastating to Iraqi armor. 30mm Gatling gun firing depleted uranium rounds that went through tank armor like it was not there. A 10 pilots destroyed more Iraqi vehicles than any other aircraft in the war. Iraqi tank crews learned to fear the sound of its gun before they ever saw the aircraft. Tornado GR-1, British strike aircraft that flew the most dangerous missions of the war. Low-level attacks on Iraqi airfields at night, using JP-2-33 runway denial weapons. Several Tornadoes were shot down, doing exactly what they were sent to do. The crews that flew those missions knew the risk and flew anyway. Now, Iraqi jets. MiG-29. Iraq's most advanced fighter, and it was not enough. Soviet-built, capable on paper, but Iraqi pilots were outclassed by American F-15 crews with better training, better missiles, and better radar. Every MiG-29 that engaged coalition aircraft was destroyed. The survivors flew to Iran on the second day and never came back. Mirage F-1. French-built fighter Iraq had used effectively against Iran in the 1980s, armed with Exocet missiles that had sunk ships in the Falklands. Coalition planners were nervous about Mirage F-1s threatening naval vessels in the Gulf. Most were destroyed on the ground before they could threaten anything. MiG-23. Soviet fighter Iraq fielded in large numbers, outclassed by F-15s in every category. Iraqi MiG-23 pilots who stayed to fight were shot down. Those who ran made it to Iran. After the first week, Iraqi Air Force had essentially ceased to exist as a fighting force. Su-25, Soviet ground attack aircraft Iraq used against coalition ground forces. Tough, low-flying, and armed with rockets and bombs. But without air cover, the Su-25 was hunted by coalition fighters every time it tried to operate. The few that flew combat missions in the ground war found American F-15s waiting for them. That brings us to coalition air defense. Patriot missile system. America deployed Patriot batteries to defend Saudi Arabia and Israel from Iraqi Scud missiles. On January 18, 1991, a Patriot battery intercepted a Scud missile over Dhahran in the first successful ballistic missile intercept in combat history. Not every intercept worked, but the Patriot changed what air defense could do forever. Rapier, British short-range air defense missile system deployed to protect coalition airfields and logistics hubs. Iraqi aircraft that survived long enough to reach coalition rear areas found Rapier batteries waiting. Few did. Now, Iraqi air defense. S-75 Divina. Soviet long-range surface-to-air missile system Iraq deployed around Baghdad and key installations. Shot down several coalition aircraft in the early days of the war before American HARM missiles and F-117 strikes destroyed the radar systems that guided them. Blind air defense missiles are just expensive scrap metal. Roland, French-built short-range air defense system Iraq used to protect forward positions. Brought down several coalition aircraft flying low-level missions in the early days. Coalition pilots learned to respect Roland batteries and adjusted their attack profiles to stay out of its engagement envelope. ZSU-23-4 Shilka. Soviet self-propelled anti-aircraft gun with 4 23mm cannons and its own radar. The weapon coalition pilots feared most at low altitude, fast-firing, mobile, and accurate enough to hit fast jets flying below 3,000 feet. Several coalition aircraft were brought down by Shilka fire. 10 pilots learned to pop up, fire, and dive back below the radar coverage before the Shilka could track them. Now the Navy. USS Missouri battleship. America brought a World War II-era battleship to the Gulf War and fired its 16-inch guns at Iraqi positions in Kuwait. Each shell weighed as much as a small car and hit with the force of a small earthquake. Iraqi troops who survived the bombardment surrendered in large numbers. Some surrendered to the spotter drones the Missouri used to aim its guns. USS Bunker Hill, American cruiser that fired the first Tomahawk cruise missiles in combat history on the opening night of the war. Sitting in the Red Sea, Bunker Hill's Tomahawks flew hundreds of miles into Iraq and hit targets in Baghdad with television cameras watching. The age of precision cruise missile warfare began that night. HMS Gloucester, British destroyer that shot down an Iraqi Silkworm anti-ship missile with a Sea Dart missile. The first time in history, one missile had intercepted another in combat. The Silkworm was headed for USS Missouri. HMS Gloucester saved a battleship. Iraqi Navy. Iraq had a small navy of missile boats and patrol craft that was destroyed almost entirely in the first days of the war. Coalition aircraft and surface ships hunted every Iraqi vessel that moved. By the time the ground war started, the Iraqi Navy had ceased to exist. And finally, special weapons. Tomahawk cruise missile. Launched from ships and submarines in the Red Sea and Persian Gulf, Tomahawks flew through Baghdad streets at rooftop level and hit specific buildings while CNN cameras watched live. 288 fired in the Gulf War, the weapon that changed how America goes to war forever. A GM-65 Maverick, air-to-ground missile, American A-10 and F-16 pilots used to destroy Iraqi armor from outside anti-aircraft gun range, locked onto the heat signature of tank engines and guided itself to impact. Iraqi tank crews had no warning and no defense. Thousands fired, hundreds of Iraqi vehicles destroyed. BGM-71 Tau missile, anti-tank missile American ground forces used to destroy Iraqi armor at long range. Bradley crews fired tow missiles at T-72s from distances the Iraqi gunners could not return fire across. The combination of thermal sights and Tau missiles made American infantry fighting vehicles more dangerous than most countries' main battle tanks. Iraqi missiles. Scud-B, Soviet ballistic missile Iraq, modified to reach further than the original design allowed. Saddam fired 88 Scuds at Saudi Arabia and Israel during the war, hoping to drag Israel into the fight and break the coalition apart. Most missed their targets by miles. One hit an American barracks in Dhahran, killing 28 soldiers. The most casualties America took in the entire war from a single weapon. Al-Hussein, Iraq's modified version of the Scud with extended range, reached Tel Aviv and Riyadh, but accuracy was so poor that hitting a specific target was more luck than skill. Israel came within hours of launching its own strikes on Iraq in retaliation. America kept Israel out of the war by promising to hunt every Scud launcher in western Iraq. Coalition Special Forces spent the entire ground war doing exactly that. Silkworm anti-ship missile. Chinese-built anti-ship missile Iraq fired at coalition naval vessels in the Gulf. One was shot down by HMS Gloucester, saving USS Missouri. The threat of Silkworm missiles kept coalition ships cautious about operating close to the Kuwaiti coast throughout the war.